We are live.
The world of energy is changing. The energy system of the future will be based on sustainable, renewable energy. Innovation and digitalization are changing the way we consume energy. How can decision makers in governments and businesses prepare for the energy transition? Long-term energy scenarios, LTES, can help plan for a low-carbon future by identifying opportunities, potential risks, and cost-effective near-term solutions. IRENA actively supports energy planners through its global LTES network. Governments can share their experience, exchange best practices, and explore the most pressing future trends together with global experts. Government institutions and supporting technical agencies can become members of the LTES network. Join us. Contact LTES at irena.org for more information.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the fourth session of the webinar series on long-term energy scenarios, LTES, for developing national energy transition plans in Asia. My name is Juan Jose Garcia, and I'm Program Officer of Clean Energy Transition Scenarios at the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. And again, I have the pleasure to be your host today. This webinar series is organized as one of the main activities of IRENA's LTES network, a community of energy scenario practitioners in the government sectors that aims to facilitate these spaces of sharing of experiences and practices on developing and using energy scenarios. This webinar series is implemented in partnership with the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, ESCAP. Today, we are continuing the presentations from selected countries across the Asian region to showcase their energy scenario planning practices for setting long-term policies, long-term strategies, or development plans to support and also accelerate the clean energy transition. Over the past weeks, we had the opportunity to listen and learn from the experiences of the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and most recently from Nepal and Pakistan. Today, we'll have the opportunity to learn from the experiences of Bhutan through the Department of Energy of the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Next slide, please. So this is today's agenda. We will start with a very brief presentations of the LTES network to give you some background of the LTES network works and also for the purpose of this webinar series. And after that, we'll have the country presentation from Bhutan. And after the presentation of the country, we'll have a segment to discussion with the speaker. Also, during this time, we will have the opportunity to address some of the questions from your side, from the audience. So next slide, please. And before we start today, some housekeeping announcement. In case you have any questions to our speakers, please, we kindly request you to use the Q&A function in the Zoom platform to post any question you may have. And also the slides and of course the recordings of our previous sessions are now available in IRENA's webpage. So you can access to them using the address that you are seeing right now on your screens. Next slide, please. Okay, now I would like to start today's session with the LTES presentation, and I'm glad to introduce Ms. Angela Mutsotso. She is Associate Professional in IRENA's Innovation and Technology Center, and she's part of the LTES network team, and she will give us an overview of the long-term energy scenario network. So please, Angela, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Thank you, Juan Jose, for this. Can you hear me, Juan Jose?
Yes.
Oh, great, thank you. So today I'll make a brief presentation on the Long-Term Energy Scenarios Network. For a full version of this presentation, you can access the recordings of the very first session on the website, as Juan Jose pointed out. Next slide, please. So the Long-Term Energy Scenarios Network, the LTES network, is a global network. We have 29 members, 29 country members, and 13 technical partner institutions. And we work with our members and partners to collect and disseminate information on national LTES practices among scenario practitioners. The network aims to be a platform where this information is collected, where countries and institutions are able to share their best practice through various seminars, regional events, and webinars, as well as other areas, other types of meetings, and we collect this information, synthesize it into analytical reports, and then present it in the reports available on our website. Next slide, please. And this is an example of the report that we have. We have 6 key reports on our website, with the latest being the Africa report, the scenarios for the energy transition, experiences and good practice in Africa, and the stock taking and alignment report, which focuses on long-term energy scenarios and low emissions development strategies. This report was released in January 2023, and as a result of this website, of this webinar, we plan to synthesize the lessons that we get and also present this in a report available to all our members, but also useful for everyone across the globe. The LTES network focuses on 3 specific pillars when looking at the work. So the first involves strengthening scenario development, and we look at how countries, what measures they've taken to strengthen this process of developing scenarios, be it through the actual process, so including stakeholder engagement, or using various aspects within the government, and also the technical community within the country at the national level. So we look at how they're strengthening this process, and also collect and share good practice on how scenario development can be strengthened. The second pillar involves improving scenario use. And from some of our reports and from our work, it is evident that scenarios are used just for long-term energy planning, but also for making investment decisions by government, for climate planning, and for other integrated planning to make it a more sustainable and inclusive process. And the third pillar involves identifying capacity building approaches. So how countries and how technical institutions build their capacity when it comes to scenario development, and also the modeling aspect, but also other aspects of it. So in building capacity, for instance, on stakeholder engagement and other aspects of long-term energy planning. Next slide, please. And this particular webinar, so we have a regional focus, and this is an example of the previous webinars that we've had. So in 2021, we held the Latin America and Caribbean webinar series, similar to this Asia webinar series, where we had 14 countries, and we partnered with Get Transform and ECLAC to bring together various countries and moderate the discussions, and then finally synthesize the learnings we got from this into our report. But we also use these learnings when, for instance, giving presentations in other aspects, other areas when we're invited to present, and also across other programs within IRENA. The other one, which I mentioned earlier, that is the Africa webinar series in 2022, which was in late 2022, late 2021, early 2022, and then we released a report in January of this year. And again, this brought together 9 countries and 3 regional institutions, including power pools and other regional institutions. We had partners including UNECA, Get Transformed, the African Development Bank, the African Union Development Agency, and the African Union for this webinar series. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we compile this knowledge into regionally focused publications. So there's the Latin America report, the Africa report, and then the Asia report, which we hope to produce as soon as we complete this webinar series. So Thank you. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. And please feel free to reach out to us with the address listed on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Ms. Dawa Chhoedron. She's from the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Ms. Dawa has dedicated her career to the energy and engineering sectors within the Royal Government of Bhutan. Currently, she's serving as Chief Engineer for the Power System and Market Division and the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. And she has previously held significant roles in the Department of Hydropower, Power System, and the Department of Renewable Energy. She is also a member of the UNFCCC roster of experts and also has been part of initiatives like the International Climate Initiative Project for Biodiversity Landscapes in Bhutan. So, Ms. Dawa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Juan. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever is befitting. I'm Dawa Chhoedron, and as introduced, I currently serve as the head of the Power Systems and Market Divisions in the Department of Energy, which is under the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, a ministry of the Royal Government of Bhutan. So I'm delighted to be here, and I'm happy to present on behalf of the ministry on the Bhutan's long-term energy scenarios or the LTES in short. As this is a very focused discussion, so I'll be speaking on the aspects of the development of LTES, the use of LTES, and the future outlook that is relevant in terms of Bhutan. And to set some context and to give a very generic backdrop to the discussions, I'd like to speak a few on the Bhutan's case. Bhutan is a small landlocked country of roughly around 700,000 people and a GDP of around 2.5 billion US dollars. And thermal energy needs dominate the energy demand with a 62% share, mostly due to the use of biomass, as we are mostly agrarian. And while the remaining energy is from electricity, which is predominantly supplied through the grid from the clean and renewable hydropower generation. So now, next, please, if I can go to the next slide. So now the planning and strategizing and setting of the national goals and targets happen at the highest level and are trickled down as activities and targets for the implementers. The goals and visions are firmly founded on the principles of gross national happiness. And this has been, I think, of common knowledge to many that Bhutan kind of symbolizes the gross national happiness concept. And this is firmly ingrained in our approach to the planning. And this is focused broadly on the themes of energy, technology, infrastructure, food, and water, and is intrinsically linked to the impacts that it will have on people, prosperity, and progress. And the ultimate goal, of course, is to achieve develop Bhutan, which we have set for ourselves. That is by 2034, that we should achieve the status of developed Bhutan. Now, through this approach, long-term plans are usually drawn up. And currently, we are in the process of drawing up long-term plan of spanning around 10 years. And the key performance indicators, the KPIs, are identified. This is a highly consultative process and involves many sessions of discussions and exercises with stakeholders, which involve the government, all the government planning entities, including the local governments, and it also involves the private sector representatives. And for the programmatic zooming down, the 5-year plans are also drawn up soon after, and then the key performance indicators for the 5-year plans are also identified. And this also goes through a rigorous process of consultation, but this is more at a sector-specific level and engagement. Now, apart from that, in the energy sector, as I've reflected, very broadly, we have the policy documents drawn and updated depending on the need and not necessarily on a periodic basis, but which is founded on the unwavering foundation of the provisions in the Constitution of the Kingdom of Bhutan that was adopted in 2008. And our key energy policies are the Sustainable Hydropower Development Policy, which was formulated in 2008 and then underwent major changes and revision as the Sustainable Hydropower Development Policy 2021, where we now this policy is shaped to address the hydropower related aspects, mainly in terms of how hydropower is going to be developed in the country, and laying down the provisions for ownership, financing modes, defining the concessions, and the royalty energy, and also and quite recently in the revised hydropower development policy, we also have the innovative optics such as the green hydrogen economy, and then we also have provisions for the cross-border trade and electricity markets, to just name a few key highlights of this policy. Then in the years after coming up with the first Sustainable Hydropower Development Policy back in 2008, soon after we felt the need to come up with a policy to address other than large hydropower, alternative renewable energy, that is solar, wind, small hydropower, biomass, and other forms of energy. And then we developed the Alternate Renewable Energy Policy 2013, which notably sets a target of 20 megawatt of alternative renewable energy by 2025. And apart from the supply of energy, we have the demand side being addressed through the National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Policy, which is fairly recent. It was developed in 2019. While we have other policies within the realm of energy sector, these are the three policies which are the guiding policies based on which long-term energy strategizing takes place. Now, we also have supplementing to the strategizing process is the roadmaps and master plans, which I'll touch upon in the next slide. Next, please. So at present, we are in the process of evolving, and we are also taking a more holistic approach to energy sector. And especially in the energy sector, we are looking at a more fast-paced but sustainable development. And we are in the process of formulating an energy policy, which will address, apart from the three policies that I talked about, that will now merge and form a new policy, which will address all aspects of energy, be it in the terms of the forms of energy, the aspects of energy, that is demand side, cross-border, renewable or non-renewable, the trade of energy, etc. So in terms of the institutional setup, it's as per the slide that is presented. So the institutional setup, as I said, is highly top-down, but also very highly consultative. So we have the cabinet, to which the committee of the 4 coordinating secretaries report. And this is a very recent development. This has gone through the process of transformation. This is a new setup that is there in the country. So we have the committee of 4 coordinating secretaries who lead the 4 clusters, which is an amalgamation of different ministries. And in total, we have 9 ministries, and the 4 coordinating secretaries supported by a cabinet secretariat, which performs all the secretarial services of bringing the stakeholders together, putting together the long-term plans that I talked about, the 5-year plans. And this is done so to have a more cohesive working and breaking the silos between the ministries, between the departments, and between various sectors in the country. So in the aspect of energy sector, we have under the economic cluster, we have the ministry that I represent right now, the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, under which is the Department of Energy, that's my organization, which is mandated as the central coordinating agency and the focal point on all matters related to energy, power systems, and energy markets, including cross-border trade of electricity. And our department formulates the national policies, plans, procedures, and guidelines, and we are also responsible to assess and advise the government on the energy security aspects, the reliability aspects, the quality aspects, the subsidy and royalty, the energy reforms, and we are the nodal agency to drive innovation and adopt transformative solutions from a national perspective. Now, our main role, if you pin down, is to seek interventions to ensure energy security. Now, this is something that we do collaboratively and in a coordinated manner. So this is our role is quite well reflected in the mission statement that is reflected on the slide, which is to achieve the energy security by harnessing green energy resources and adoption of transformative and innovative technological solutions. So the Department of Energy is the planning and strategizing body of the government, and we have an autonomous regulator. If you can see the slide, the Electricity Regulatory Authority, who is not only responsible for regulations, but is also responsible for tariff determination, licensing, and monitoring. And then we also have an autonomous body for the power system operation, and this is also a fairly new creation in the institutional arrangement. So the BPSO, or the Bhutan Power System Operator, is an autonomous entity created, and they look after the operation aspects and also in liaising with the cross-border transmission of power. And then we have the two utilities, one from the generation aspect and other one from the transmission and distribution aspect. So we have the Druk Green Power Corporation Limited, who looks after the generation aspect, and they're actually tasked with the operation and maintenance of the hydropower plants that are already developed. And quite recently, they have also been tasked by the government to develop hydropower on their own and also solar power plants on their own. They are also designated as the bulk exporter, and they are also designated as the trader for import of power. And quite recently, they are also designated as the settlement nodal agency. And we have the Bhutan Power Corporation Limited, who is responsible for the transmission and distribution. It is the sole utility which looks after the transmission and distribution in the country. And they are also responsible for the cross-border transmission of power for import and export. As I said, the approach is highly consultative. So all these entities meet together quite often, sometimes more than 5 or 6 times a year, to discuss anything related to the energy sector under the Bhutan Power System Coordination Committee that is chaired by the department. So in terms of the governance structure, we also have the commercial and the investment arm of the Royal Government of Bhutan, which is the Druk Holding and Investment, which is under the Ministry of Finance and DHI. They are responsible to provide governance and financial directives to the utilities, that is the Druk Green Power Corporation and the Bhutan Power Corporation Limited, while the technical directives or the aspects are routed to the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources through the Bhutan Power System Coordination Committee. And next, please. And in terms of the long-term energy scenario development, we look at 3 main aspects: the generation, demand, and infrastructure. And in future, a market will also play a critical role. But for now, these are the 3 broad areas that we look into. So in the case of generation, we assess the historical data and the plans that take into account the plans of the government and make our generation forecast for mostly around a 10-year period. And the critical inputs to making this generation forecasting comes from the master plans that are available. So one is the Power System Master Plan, which lays down quite in detail the hydropower development plan in terms of the feasibility, the ranking, and the location, the prioritization as well. Then we have the Renewable Energy Master Plan, which was developed in 2015 to 17, and it overlays a plan of envisages to 2032. And here we have the theoretical potentials, theoretical potentials laid out for the hydropower development, the solar, be it PV or thermal, wind, and biomass. And for specific need also, we have strategies such as the National Biogas Implementation Strategy, which sets up the target that we intend to achieve for other forms of energy, for in this case, the biogas. And quite recently, we have the recent addition to it is the Energy Efficiency Roadmap, which has been adopted, and the National Green Hydrogen Roadmap, which is not yet adopted, but has been completed from the department side, and we hope to have it out there fairly soon. And in terms of demand, we have the Energy Data Directory published, which we intend to publish annually, but for now we are able to publish only sporadically due to the limitation in the resources and human resource. And in there, we have the energy balance, which gives the status of the energy situation in the country as it is. And thereon, we carry out the demand forecasting. And we usually forecast for around 10 years and project it, of course, in a linear way towards 20 years if required. And demand forecasting is carried out taking into account the current situation, the historical trend, and taking into account the government's plans, and taking into account the plans, the upcoming loads that we determine through consultation with our utilities and even the large industries. So this is carried out, and together with the demand forecasting, we also carry out the supply demand analysis, and wherein we determine the import forecasting. So then this is also a fairly new endeavor from us, because historically, Bhutan has always been net surplus in terms of having electricity generation generated from the hydropower plants in the country, but of late, and in fact, starting from 2022, we have had to face a deficit in the winter months due to the inherent limitation of run-of-the-river hydropower schemes, where we have very less generation in winter. So this has become a norm for the department to carry out import forecasting as well. And the demand and the generation forecasting is carried out currently on the basis, on Microsoft Excel, and we do it in-house. And when it comes to the infrastructure planning, we come up periodically, that is in 5 years, at least once, the National Transmission Grid Master Plan. So we are currently in the process of updating the last master plan. And here we lay out the infrastructure development plans up to 2040, and taking into input the various projects that are expected to come online, and taking into account the demand that is being projected. So the infrastructure planning is done based on the use of software PSSC, where we carry out the load flow analysis to determine the kind of infrastructure that may be required for the kind of generation and demand that we foresee. So next, please. So as I said, we look into how we use the long-term energy scenario. So quite obviously, of course, the long-term energy scenario is quite important. And once we develop the long-term energy scenario, this comes extremely useful in terms of strategizing and making our plans. And this is inherently used for all our planning and policy making, in fact. And it also helps in taking a holistic approach. As I said, the Energy Data Directive, which reflects all forms of energy, also gives us the basis to have a plan in place that will look at all forms of energy. Now, it also gives a basis for the shaping of the regulatory landscape, and and envisaging a future which will be conducive to the kind of target that we set. And it also helps us in having a market. Right now, currently, we have a single buyer-seller market, which is not very highly regulated and not dynamic per se. But in future, we believe that the energy scenario will be dominated, and we intend to take the market approach. So the design of market is also dependent on the kind of energy scenario that is there. And we also use the energy scenarios for making tariff projections. So last year, we made a long-term tariff projection, which is available on our website. And we also use it for aligning our energy strategies with the national goals and visions. As I said, the national goals and visions are top-down as well as being bottom-up, because the data feeds into the shaping of the goals and vision. And we also are helped in terms of having a renewable energy development target setting. And quite recently, we also realized that the prioritization of target is also very important. For example, we have always been predominantly dependent on hydropower. And now our realization is that we have to diversify our energy resources. And we are looking into the pump storage schemes, or any other kind of storage, be it battery, the solarization, in fact, the use of solar power to complement the hydropower hydropower, and the need to decarbonize the highly energy intensive or the polluting sectors such as the transport and industry, where electricity use is limited and highly driven by petroleum fuels, which is not only detrimental in terms of the impacts on the climate, but is also detrimental to our exchequer due to it being 100% imported. And as I said, we use the scenario for the planning of the energy infrastructure development itself. And this is also trickled down into the distribution, to the level of the distribution infrastructure development plans. Now, through the scenario development, it also helps us identify gaps and needs. Quite simplistically, the gap in terms of the deficit in the energy, and also the gaps in terms of the technology need, the need of having a market in place. Those are things that we could identify because of the use of the scenario. And quite often we also come up with opportunities due to the analysis. The new opportunity that we see that is pertinent to us is the green hydrogen opportunity, the use of hybrid and multipurpose systems, to name a few. And then this has also helped us in sensitizing our highly energy intensive consumers in terms of managing their energy demand and trying to sensitize them on the potential future market scenario where the time of the day tariff could be implemented to manage the peak and all that. And of course, as I said, the energy efficiency initiatives are also driven largely through the need to have this low-hanging fruits harnessed. And quite importantly, and of very high, I think, critical need to us is the investment planning and resource mobilization. So this has been a bottleneck in many of our project plans. And I think due to the scenario planning, we foresee a huge need of investment. And due to the need of the investment and the resource mobilization, that could also curtail our ambitious renewable energy. So blend of the two is something that we are looking at. And in terms of coordination and communication, focus just on the energy scenario. As I said, we carry out the supply demand forecast. And while this is also fairly new, we have just started doing this on an annual basis since last, I think, 2021 only. And this is being shared internally within the energy sectors. And of late, we are in the process of developing a business intelligence dashboard so that it can be shared to a wider circle. Then the scenario assumptions are developed in consultation and coordination with our utilities, the industries, and of course the generators. And these are done through the formation of working committees, technical groups, and highly coordinated from the Bhutan Power System Coordination Committee that I earlier on talked about. And the targets, as I said, the consultation process goes through and through. The energy targets that is developed at a basic working level gets incorporated at the highest level of the government plan and activities. And the various master plans, strategy documents, the projections are then published in the ministry website. And we also collaborate with the regional and international entities, be it the programs, to name a few, the SAREP, the BIMSTEC, the SARC, and World Bank's initiatives, the ADB's initiatives, and especially in terms of long-term forecasting, which will not only look at the country's forecasting, but also at the regional level. Next, please. So then the use of the long-term energy scenario, and what we foresee in the future is that, particularly in the case of Bhutan, we have a rich endowment of renewable energy. So to just cite it, 33 gigawatt of hydropower, 12 gigawatt of solar, and we also have quite a significant amount of wind and biomass. This already provides a huge avenue for ambitious target setting. We could set the target, and of this, we have hardly harnessed 8%. So the target setting, there's a huge room for target setting. And then in terms of our presence in the regional energy scene, since we have nothing but only renewable energy to offer in the regional energy market, there's a huge opportunity to leverage on this and to already use the existing cross-border transmission links and the access of market that we have to enhance the regional energy security. and help the region transition to a green energy future, and also reach the country's climate goals through a collective the long-term energy scenario planning. So we find that especially in this South Asia, there is a highly complementariness of the resources, of the market, of the demand, and the proximity is quite good to have a interconnected and seamless flow of energy. And what we foresee is that we would need to use sophisticated models for the long-term energy scenario development, which will not only see the energy planning just specifically for energy sector only, but also incorporate the influences too, or by the other variables such as the economic or social factors that will influence the future energy scenario. And as I said, we are highly considering the market-based approach, and the market will have a huge impact on the energy scenario. Then, as we stated in the department's mission itself, I think innovation and embracing of transformative changes is inevitable and is needed, especially to keep pace with the world, which is moving really fast. So to name a few, we already envisage, in fact, in 2021 itself, that a green hydrogen economy could be highly viable. And to cite another example is to have pump storage schemes. And finally, if I may speak a bit about the capacity building, we carry out the forecasting and the setting of scenarios, strategizing, all at an in-house level. So we use a Microsoft Excel-based model that we have developed ourselves to carry out the long-term forecasting of supply and demand. And we are open to using other models that is available quite easily, such as the LEAP, World Bank's the EPM model. And currently how we approach this is through creation of working group, like time-bound and needs-specific working groups and technical committees, as I said, under the directive of the Power System Coordination Committee to assess the emerging energy security threats and recommend what could be the interventions. And in terms of building capacities, these are done for us or through us in terms of having workshops and trainings, depending on the projects or specific to our needs. So very specifically to the topic that was given, that is all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dawa, for this very comprehensive presentation. And thank you again for the insight you provided regarding the long-term planning approach of Bhutan in terms of the development to reach this level of development around people, prosperity, and progress. Very insightful, definitely. And actually, it's also was very interesting to see how the country is incorporating this key perspective, let's say water, food, technology, infrastructure, and of course, energy in the whole long-term planning approach. So, and in this regard, I would like to begin this segment for conversation with you. Sorry. Focusing first of all on the development process of energy scenario that the country is currently, let's say, implementing in this long-term planning process approaches. Just to be clear, and my first question is just to clarify around the scope of your energy scenarios, the current scope of your energy scenarios. My first question is, are your energy scenarios only focused on the power sector, or are you also considering the overall energy system? And I'm asking this because you mentioned that some of the uses of your energy scenarios are actually include some energy efficiency initiatives, sensitization of consumers, or decarbonization of sector transport. So that makes me the idea that you are actually considering more than the power sector, but could you clarify this to us, please?
Thank you so much for the question. Yes, I think that's a good question, and that is a question that we have raised to ourselves also. So whether are we not just focused on power sector, and should we not look at the broader energy sector? And as I said, we are in the process of developing a holistic approach to energy, which is to address all forms of energy, not just limited to the power, the electricity. So how that had happened is in terms of the supply, bulk supply of energy, and very utility scale of supply of energy, that had happened through electricity. Electricity being the most modern and the cleanest form of energy available, and the most desired form of energy available, was made available almost to the extent of 100% in the country, and which is purely from almost 100% from hydropower generation. So the policy and the regulatory and all the focus had gone to power sector due to that reason. But however, as I said, if you see the energy demand in terms of the all forms of energy that is utilized in the country, the energy data directory that we have published quite recently revealed that we are still highly dependent on thermal energy needs. So that's why our focus is now shifting from having a very, I think, deep focus on power sector to having a broad focus on all forms of energy. So the new policy is one of the initiatives that will address this. And also our the tasks, the activities, the KPIs that the department has developed. And in terms of the whole sector itself, we are focused now in other forms of energy as well.
Thank you, Ms. Dawa. Maybe a follow-up question on this one. Considering the broader scope for your energy scenario that you mentioned, you're in the progress of make a more integrated analysis in your energy scenarios and so on. So this actually will require a very strong level of coordination between, you already mentioned, between different ministries. So from your presentation, I understand that the economic cluster that you mentioned will be the main body to coordinate the efforts between ministries to produce this energy scenario, or am I wrong? Or maybe you can elaborate a little bit more how this coordination will be done, or is currently done for this approach of more integrated LTES?
Thank you. And the integration specifically for the purpose of LTES is done. The coordination is done at the Bhutan Power System Coordination Committee level, which has the members from the all the energy sector entities, that is the regulator, the power system operator, the generation utility, the distribution utility, and is presided by the Department of Energy, and which reports to the ministry, and the ministry then reports to the economic cluster, and the economic cluster reports to the government.
Okay, now it's clear to me. Thank you. And maybe another question related to this coordination level. I mean, is this coordination supported by any legal framework or any other institutional arrangement? What are the mechanisms that the country has put in place to support and actually make this coordination work?
So yes, we have the overarching, but specific to the electricity sector only. So the Electricity Act and the formation of the Power System Coordination Committee, in fact, emanates from the economic development policy that is in place. And this is also supplemented by the Sustainable Hydropower Development Policy that I talked about. Okay,
thank you very much. I have another related question, related to the coordination. It was interesting to see in the institutional governance structure that you presented, basically the presence of the Ministry of Finance. This is a figure that, let's say, some countries don't usually introduce very directly in this governance structure. So I'm curious, let's say in the context of the whole energy scenario processes, let's say, whether it's for the development of scenarios or for the use of energy scenarios, what is the role of the Ministry of Finance, or how do you engage, how this ministry actually engage with the whole process of energy scenarios?
Yes. So in terms of the engagement with Ministry of Finance, as I said, the Ministry of Finance is the overarching entity to whom the Druk Holding and Investment, which is the commercial and the investment arm of the Royal Government of Bhutan, reports to. So that way, Ministry of Finance has a hold on the energy sector, because the utilities, the Group Green Power Corporation utility, the generation utility, the transmission and distribution utility, which is the Bhutan Bhutan Power Corporation Limited, they are under the Druk Holding and Investment as a subsidiary company.
Okay, and maybe some related question, but let's say this is more in the spectrum of the use of energy scenarios. You mentioned or you presented in your slide one very interesting case of how do you use energy scenarios, or how energy scenarios are impacted some uses. And you mentioned investment planning and resource mobilization. Is this engagement with the Ministry of Finance somehow related with this final use of energy scenario you mentioned? I mean, is somehow, are you using energy scenarios to inform investment decision or to support this Ministry of Finance to, mobilize resources somehow?
Yes, please. I think this was subtle, but not explicitly mentioned, that, of course, the Ministry of Finance is responsible for the financing or the rationalization of investment for all government entities, right? So in that case, the energy, whatever is planned by the energy sector and put up as a government's plan, gets rationalization or vetted or ratified by the Ministry of Finance. So Ministry of Finance has the overall role in terms of taking care of the finance, the resource mobilization included, of any endeavor taken up by the government entity.
So we can say that at the end, well, energy scenarios in Bhutan are somehow also like supporting decisions in terms of allocation of resources.
Yes, please. That I think you can say that.
Okay, thank you. Now I just want to come back to the part of development of energy scenarios. You mentioned a very important aspect when you mentioning the development of all this, that you actually make consultation processes with utilities for identify maybe future loads in the system and so on. So these consultation processes extended to many other let's say group of stakeholders, for instance the private sector or the society in general? Are you engaging with which stakeholder are you engaging, and how this coordination is done? Is also done by the Department of Energy, or how this consultation actually works in Bhutan?
So as I said, the Bhutan Power System Coordination Committee is where the decision or the analysis and the recommendations for the government's decision happens. But beneath that, through the utilities, we have the distribution company, the Bhutan Power System Power Corporation Limited, who are mandated to consult with the consumers themselves, the energy consumers, and most notably the large energy consumers. And in terms of other consultations, those happen at different levels or different walks. For example, in terms of tariff determination, the regulator takes the role of takes the task of consulting the consumers or all private sectors and all entities involved, and they consult through public consultation.
A follow-up question on this consultation with key stakeholders. Again, I'm curious on how this consultation is supported legally. I mean, what is there any specific law, or how you actually support this process of consultation? It's always come from the acts that you already mentioned, or the policy of hydropower, or how?
In terms of public consultation for tariff determination, it is supported by law. It is mandated by law that there should be consultation. So that is how it is carried out. That is defined in the Electricity Act itself.
Okay.
But in terms of generic consultation or sensitization, we carry out as per need, and we advise the utilities to, for example, I can give you a specific example of sensitizing the private sector on the impending import of power, because this is quite important in our context, because import is at a very higher price than the supply from domestic generation. So that sensitization happens at the advice of the Bhutan Power System Coordination Committee to the utilities, who then sensitize the impacted, probably impacted consumers.
Mhm. Thank you. Also, in let's say this let's say coordination for the development of energy scenario, you highlighted one important key that actually was also highlighted in previous presentations from countries or other forum regarding the integration, let's say, of the transmission grid or distribution grid perspective into the actual development and the actual energy scenarios. So because sometimes we have seen some disconnection between the LTES that only include, for instance, the power, the supply and transformation, but not the transmission of this energy. So how is this experience actually was initiated in Bhutan? What started it, and what have been done to actually create this link between the generation and the transmission in in energy scenarios?
Thank you. So in the case of Bhutan, the energy scenario developed mostly due to the embarkation on the large hydropower development. And it has been the case that with the development of the hydropower plant, that associated transmission systems get planned. So that forms the transmission network. And with that comes the naturally the distribution network to supply to the domestic grid. And what has helped in our case is that the department taking a central coordinating role has always been able to have the view of all generation, transmission, and even the demand side under its purview, so that the planning happens together and not in an isolated manner.
No, thank you. I would like to jump right now to, let's say, always in the context of the development of energy scenario, but now in more focus, a little bit more in the actual content of energy scenario. And I mean, just in we understand that the whole process of energy planning is very well aligned with the national, let's say, ambition for development towards people, prosperity, and progress. So in this sense, this vision also includes, let's say, many features of the clean energy transition, for instance, clean energy or electrification and so on, or inclusion of welfare or job creation in the whole planning for this energy system of the future. So in terms of the content or the specific features that Bhutan is considering the energy scenarios towards the clean energy transition or your ambition of development, I'm curious if you can elaborate, let's say, very general aspects in terms of, for instance, of technology. What are you considering your energy scenario? Are you considering, for example, green hydrogen, or are you considering a storage system or more renewable? Well, you already mentioned some of that, but maybe you can give us a little more insights about this in terms of technology, in terms also if incorporation of socioeconomic impacts of specific measures, or for instance, what measure of energy efficiency are you also including in your energy scenarios that you believe that are being like very important to produce them?
Yes, thank you. So I think there are many questions in that one question.
Yeah,
So I
I'm
hope I
sorry.
can address all those. First of all, in terms of setting of the targets itself, yes, in terms of clean energy transition, we are, I mean, you may be aware that we are already carbon neutral, and in fact, we are carbon negative. And in terms of the power sector, it's 100% renewable energy. So there is no transition per se, but there is upscaling of the renewable energy. But on the non-power related energy needs, that is the thermal energy needs, yes, of course, we are looking at transition, and that's why we are focused on the clean energy transition or the, let's say, the decarbonization of the industry and the transport sector in the country, and which is specifically we're looking at through the intervention from the electric vehicle launch or the upscaling of it, the hydrogen as a use in transport sector, and also hydrogen as a use in industry sector, and energy efficiency in the industry sector to achieve the clean energy transition. So these are all parts of our plans. And in terms of the socioeconomic impact that you have mentioned, I think the very fact that we have various clusters, the economic cluster, social cluster, coming together and discussing the job creation, these are all built in within our planning. So with every plan that we have set for ourselves, we do calculate, in fact, the number of jobs that will be created, and it is built in within our planning system. I hope I have captured or answered your questions.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. Maybe one last question in terms of uses of energy scenario. You mentioned that you are in the process of elaborating your national energy policy, right? So I would like to know how the use of energy scenarios has impacted in this process of developing this energy policy.
Yes, as I said, the revelations have come through the assessment of the energy scenario, the baseline scenario itself. So through the understanding of the energy usage in the country, we have been able to identify that we need a policy at a holistic level. And as I said, that is the reason why we are going into an energy policy. And also not just in terms of amalgamating all the different forms of energy into one and addressing as one, but also in terms of the changing needs, in terms of the technology advancement, the innovation that's happening. For example, the prices of solar power going drastically down, the battery technologically exponentially improving. These are the drivers or the triggers to compel us to have an energy policy that is holistic and addresses all this together as one.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Dawa, I would like to focus a little bit on the institutional skills, the creation of institutional skills to actually develop energy scenarios or make use of the outcomes of energy scenarios. You mentioned that you are creating, or you have like a very strong in-house, let's say, core of skills for development of energy scenarios and so on. So my question here will be, let's say, during the whole process of creating these skills in the country, could you share with us what are the main or the key lessons that you have learned to create these in-house skills? In terms of, I don't know, resources, sustainability, or what was the main, let's say, enabler to start creating these skills? And I'm asking this because we have seen some cases in other regions, in other countries, where this is actually a real issue, that how the government can actually create their own skills and how to make them sustainable in the time. But sometimes they struggle with, okay, but what will be the starting point of all this, or how should we proceed? Should we start with some cooperation or with some bilateral cooperation with other countries? So I want to if you can share the main key lessons that you have learned in this process of creating your own institutional skills.
Thank you. In terms of having the institutional skills, I would say the drive is very strong, but in terms of the skills, I would not say that is very strong. And you have asked what is the enabler. The need has been the enabler of developing this skill. So it is highly driven by the need to have such a the long-term energy scenario establishment in the country, that need has driven us to use what is available to us. As I said, the tools that we use are quite fairly simple, but we have used it to the extent of its capability, and that has really helped us in developing scenarios, in making recommendations, key recommendations to the government. And that way it is sustainable to some extent, that when tools are simple, I think it is sustainable. But what we have learned is the tool that we use is highly prone to human errors. And that needs our constant vigilance so that we eliminate errors. So that's why, as I said, we are moving towards sophisticated, we are we are ready to move into sophisticated models. And as you said, resources are, I think, challenges. We need to have the kind of dedicated resources, which is in a sustainable way to sustain our endeavor to have robust scenarios developed for times to come, and also which will incorporate not just a simplistic energy forecasting or simplistic scenario development, which will also have many nuances of having the other social factors inbuilt, the economic factors inbuilt, the different variables inbuilt, the triggers or the influences from the global changing climate also inbuilt within that. And also the climate aspect also built in. Like, for example, I can give you an example of the generation forecasting. We depend on the historical trend forecasting, but what we have learned is if we can do an analysis of weather forecasting that is highly accurate, then our generation forecasting, not just on the historical trend and as per our plans, we can make a even sharper forecasting, which is based on scientific data that can be built in within our model itself and can be used very effectively.
Thank you for your answer, Ms. Dawa. Maybe one last question from my side before we jump in some question from the audience. And my last question to you is in terms of the challenges. You already mentioned a few during your presentation and your previous answer, but what else do you believe that is required in terms of, I don't know, in terms of general challenge per se? What is required to keep improving in the development of energy scenarios and keep improving in the use of energy scenario?
I think key is human capacity. And if you have the right human capacity, I think others can follow. And as I said, resources are our challenges. So being still an LDC, of course, we are graduating in December of this year, but still a developing nation. I think resources, as any other nation, we face this challenge of not having the adequate resources. And in terms of human capacity, it is acute, I think, shortage that we face. Already our population is quite less. And in terms of having the right people for specific development of scenarios and specific tasks, I think it's very difficult to find that highly skilled and highly professional in somebody who's dedicated to only one aspect of this is very difficult to find in Bhutan. That is one. And in terms of the entire, I think, technology adoption also, while we are very keen, I think that also is faced with the challenge of having the resources to have the infiltration or proliferation of use of advanced technology in the energy sector, which will highly, I mean, which will have a very critical role in terms of having the scenario developed and having real-time data reporting, real-time scenario, so which will have an impact in the kind of quality decisions that we can make in a timely manner. So that is a quick decision that is made on a timely manner and not having to depend on human interpretations.
Okay. Thank you again, Ms. Dawa, for this comprehensive presentation. Also, and of course, this short dialogue that we had right now. I just want to address then a couple of questions from the audience that we have collected right now. And I would like to start with this one regarding the use of energy scenarios. So the question reads, what are the sector-wise scenarios in Bhutan related to net zero target? Specifically, in which sector net zero target will be hard to achieve?
Yes, in the case of Bhutan, as a country, we have already achieved net zero target. In fact, we are the first country to, I think, announce the carbon neutral pledge. And we have pledged to remain carbon neutral. And in fact, we are negative in terms of emission, the net negative. I mean, negative in terms of net emissions. However, if you look at the sector specific, as rightly pointed out in the questions, I think if you see the energy generation, it is zero emission, so that is already achieved. But in terms of transport, I think we are finding it difficult to achieve in the transport sector, which is highly dependent on petroleum fuels, which is completely 100% imported. That is one key sector that we are looking at to transition and achieve decarbonization of. And that will be quite difficult to achieve while we do our best to ensure that the benefits of hydropower generation also goes into the transport sector. And another transformative key intervention that we are seeking is the green hydrogen economy. The use of fuel cell vehicles, the hydrogen vehicles are some key intervention that we see will help in the transition. And also in the industry also, I think there will be difficulty in achieving net zero. If you just look at the sector specific in industry, it's also highly driven by use of fossil fuels like coal. So there also we are looking at the energy efficiency interventions to ensure that we can transition to net zero emission.
Okay, thank you. And well, taking advantage that you mentioned energy efficiency right now, there is another question here, actually regarding on scenario content. And it reads, if you could elaborate a little bit more on demand-side management initiative and energy efficiency strategies in place for Bhutan.
Yes, broadly, we have the policy, energy efficiency and conservation policy, which sets out our aspirations in achieving energy efficiency targets. And we have also split those into sectors. So we have the building sector, industry sector, transport sector, and we also say that the appliances sector can be also tackled. So some of the key initiatives that we are embarking on is the energy auditing of the industries, the energy auditing of the buildings, having the set of codes for buildings and industries. And I already mentioned in terms of practicality, implementing driving the EV infiltration in the transport sector, and also are going into a more efficient I think use of processes like boilers, switching off thermal energy to renewable energy such as electricity, which is homegrown in an industry sector, are some of the interventions that we are looking at. And as I said, in the appliance sector also, we are targeting standards and labeling program where we intend to set some minimum standard in terms of having the energy efficiency standard in appliances, select appliances like refrigerator, and so on. I'm sorry, I'm coughing. Okay, let me have a sip of coffee.
It's okay now. Thank you very much, Ms. Dawa. And maybe one last question for the audience. And now is related with the institutional arrangement. It reads, in the institutional arrangement, you have a social cluster. Can you elaborate more on this? It says, I'm interested in and know how you involve the public in the planning and policymaking process, as you put a lot of importance on the happiness factor, which I suppose means public acceptance. So that's the question.
Yes. As I said, all plans are sieved through or filtered through the lenses of people, progress, and prosperity. So people essentially means how does it benefit people? What are the social benefits? So that is a lens that we see through. Any kind of plan is sieved through that. And under that, the very fact that we have social cluster within the planning of at the ministerial level is that there is a keen focus on the social aspects. That is where, and under that we have quite specifically the education, the labor, all the people aspects are already built in. And that way it is taken care of as a highly important factor in determining our national plans and goals.
Okay.
And if I may, even at the within the energy sector, even at a project-specific level, if you see our policies, I think we have a huge focus on social and environment, so that every project goes through a rigorous scanning or the assessment of social and environment factors that is there built in through the provisions in the policy itself.
Okay, thank you very much. No, I believe we reach our time here. So thank you again, Ms. Dawa, for your interventions, for answering those questions also. And I will ask my colleague Nadim if he can share the presentation one more time. So I would like to conclude the session of today with some announcement for the upcoming session. So the session number 5 will take place on the 2nd week of September. So we're taking a 2 weeks break after this session. And the session number 5 will have the opportunity to learn from the cases of Singapore and the Republic of Korea. So please be pending of the social media, IRENA social media or social network. We will be posting more updates on the upcoming sessions, and also we'll be uploading the recordings and presentation of today's session in our website, and we will inform you accordingly. Now, to finalize the session, I would like to thank you all for your attendance today, and also a special thank you for our speaker, Ms. Dawa, for the insights from Bhutan on energy scenarios. And yes, thank you very much. Thank you for attending, and we will play a short video to finalize today's session. Thank you.
Thank you.
The world of energy is changing. The energy system of the future will be based on sustainable, renewable energy. Innovation and digitalization are changing the way we consume energy. How can decision makers in governments and businesses prepare for the energy transition? Long-term energy scenarios, LTES, can help plan for a low-carbon future by identifying opportunities, potential risks, and cost-effective near-term solutions. IRENA actively supports energy planners through its global LTES network. Governments can share their experience, exchange best practices, and explore the most pressing future trends together with global experts. Government institutions and supporting technical agencies can become members of the LTES network. Join us. Contact LTES at irena.org for more information.